Are you ready to take a detour down memory lane and maybe, just maybe, find love in the most unexpected of places? Then buckle up, because you're about to embark on a heartwarming journey to Harmony Springs, Arizona, and the charmingly weathered Route 66 diner. Here, amidst the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling pancakes, we'll meet Jake Miller, a kind-hearted single dad struggling to keep his family's diner alive on the forgotten stretch of Route 66. Life in Harmony Springs is as tough as the Arizona desert, and Jake's dreams are fading faster than the neon on his diner sign. But destiny, as it often does, has a funny way of changing direction. And it arrives in Harmony Springs in the form of Eleanor Vance, a sophisticated city dweller whose sleek black car decides to break down right outside Route 66 diner. From that chance encounter, a spark ignites between two worlds seemingly universes apart. Can a simple diner owner and a powerful businesswoman find love amidst mismatched coffee mugs and million-dollar deals? Will they be able to revive not just the Route 66 diner, but also their own hearts? Find out in Roadside Diner Destiny, a heartwarming tale of love, second chances, and the magic that can be found in the most ordinary of places. And if you love stories that warm your soul and leave you with a smile, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey down Route 66. Don't miss a single chapter of Jake and Eleanor's unforgettable story. Let's get started. A struggling single dad helped a woman on the road. She turned out to be a billionaire. The Arizona sun, a relentless spotlight in a cloudless sky, beat down on Harmony Springs, baking the asphalt of Route 66 until it shimmered. Inside the Route 66 diner, though, a different kind of warmth prevailed. The comforting aroma of butter sizzling on a griddle, mingling with the sweet scent of maple syrup and freshly brewed coffee. It was a symphony of breakfast smells, even if it was well past noon. Behind the worn counter, Jake flipped pancakes with practiced ease, his movements a fluid ballet honed over years. He wasn't just a cook, he was an artist of diner cuisine. Locals swore his blueberry pancakes were the best this side of the Mississippi, light and fluffy with just the right hint of sweetness. He could whip up a Denver omelet in under a minute, his hand a blur of motion, and his coffee, strong and dark as midnight, was legendary. "Daddy, can I flip one?" A small voice piped up, breaking through the sizzle and hum. Jake glanced down at Sarah, his 6-year-old daughter, perched on a stool by the counter, her bright blue eyes wide with fascination. Her pigtails, the color of spun sunshine, bounced as she leaned forward. "Almost, Peanut," he chuckled, his voice warm, a deep rumble that chased away the diner's midday quiet. "These are almost ready to dance off the griddle and onto someone's plate." Sarah giggled, clapping her. "And dance, pancakes, dance." He carefully slid the golden brown pancakes onto a waiting plate, adding a pat of butter that melted instantly. "Ta-da!" he announced with a flourish, presenting the plate to Sarah as if it were a masterpiece. "Breakfast for a princess." Sarah beamed, her smile a mirror image of her mother's, hitting him right in the heart. "Thank you, Daddy. You're the best flipper ever." "And you're the best pancake taste tester ever," he winked, ruffling her hair. He set the plate in front of her, along with a small pitcher of syrup. He watched her dig in, a familiar ache tightening in his chest. Moments like these, Sarah's unrestrained joy, were the fuel that kept him going, the sunlight that pierced through the clouds of worry that perpetually shadowed his life. Life hadn't always been this precarious. He and Mary had dreams, big bright dreams for Route 66 diner, for Harmony Springs, for their little family. Mary, with her infectious laughter and business savvy, had envisioned expanding the diner, turning it into a Route 66 destination. Jake, with his culinary skills and handyman talents, was ready to build it, brick by brick, pancake by pancake. Then the diagnosis: cancer, silent, swift, and merciless. 2 years. That's all they'd had after the world tilted on its axis. 2 years of hope and heartbreak, of treatments and tears and bills. Oh, the bills, mountains of them, even with insurance. Mountains that still loomed over him, years after Mary was gone. He'd sold their house, moved into the small apartment above the diner to cut costs. He'd poured every penny, every ounce of energy into keeping the diner afloat, hoping to honor Mary's dream, hoping to build a stable future for Sarah. But Harmony Springs wasn't booming. The interstate had bled the life out of Route 66, and the town, once a vibrant stop for travelers, was slowly fading, businesses shuttering, families moving away in search of opportunity. The diner, once a bustling hub of the community, was now struggling, mirroring the town's slow decline. He glanced around the empty diner, the silence amplifying the weight of his worries. The faded neon sign outside, blinking intermittently, seemed to mock him, a flickering promise of a brighter past. He was behind on the mortgage, the suppliers were getting impatient, and Sarah's 6th birthday was next month, a milestone he desperately wanted to celebrate properly. He forced a smile as Sarah finished her pancakes, her face smeared with syrup, her eyes shining. "More, Daddy, please." "Hold your horses, Speedy," he chuckled, taking her plate. "Let's get you cleaned up first." He wiped her face with a napkin, his touch gentle, his heart overflowing with love. He might be struggling. He might be facing a mountain of debt and uncertainty, but he had Sarah. And for her, he'd keep flipping pancakes, keep fixing broken neon signs, keep fighting for their little corner of the world, one day, one pancake, one smile at a time. As he carried their plates to the small kitchen in the back, he heard the distinct sound of a car approaching, a low, powerful purr that was different from the rumble of the usual pickups that frequented Route 66. He paused, listening, a sliver of hope flickering in his weary heart. Maybe, just maybe. He stepped back into the diner, wiping his hands on his apron, just as a sleek black car, gleaming like obsidian against the dusty landscape, pulled into his gravel parking lot. It was a car that belonged to a different world, a world far removed from the quiet struggles of Harmony Springs and Route 66 diner. He watched, his breath catching slightly in his throat. The engine silenced, and the driver's side door began to swing open. Destiny, in the form of polished chrome and tinted glass, had just arrived at Route 66 diner. The driver's side door of the sleek black car swung open with a hushed, almost soundless click, revealing a pair of elegantly shod feet, followed by slender legs encased in tailored cream trousers. Jake watched, momentarily frozen, as the woman unfolded herself from the low-slung vehicle with a grace that seemed incongruous against the backdrop of the dusty diner parking lot. She straightened, and Jake's breath caught again, this time for a different reason. It wasn't just the car that belonged to another world. The woman did too. She was striking, with silver hair swept back in a sophisticated style, framing a face that, despite the faint lines around her eyes, radiated both strength and a quiet sadness. She wore sunglasses, large and dark, but even through them, Jake sensed an intelligence that could see right through pretense and into the heart of things. She paused by the open door, taking in the Route 66 diner with a slow, deliberate gaze. Her head tilted slightly, as if assessing every faded detail. The peeling paint on the clapboard siding, the flickering neon sign with its missing R, the dusty gravel crunching under her expensive heels. Then her gaze settled on Jake, still standing frozen by the diner entrance, toolbox in hand. Slowly, deliberately, she removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were a startling shade of ice blue, clear and sharp as glacial meltwater. They held a hint of weariness, but also an unmistakable spark of curiosity. "Excuse me." Her voice was low, smooth as polished stones, with a faint, almost unplaceable accent. "Is this Route 66 diner?" Jake blinked, snapping himself out of his momentary stupor. He swallowed, forcing a smile, trying to banish the image of dir flashing erratically above her head. "Yes, ma'am, it is," he replied, his voice a little rougher than he intended. "You found us." "Found you." A slight lift of one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I believe my GPS directed me here, though I confess," she glanced around. Again, taking in the deserted highway, I was beginning to wonder if it had made a mistake. Jake chuckled, a genuine sound this time, easing some of the tension knotting his shoulders. GPS can be optimistic about Route 66 these days, not as much traffic as there used to be. So I gather. Her gaze returned to him, those piercing blue eyes assessing him directly. "Are you the owner?" Guilty as charged. He gestured towards the diner with a sweep of his hand. "Jake Miller, and you are Eleanor Vance." She offered her hand, her movements precise and economical. Jake wiped his hand quickly on his apron before extending it to meet hers. Her handshake was firm, confident, but surprisingly warm. He noticed the subtle scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive, a world away from the smell of coffee and bacon grease that usually permeated his senses. "Miss Vance," he nodded. "Pleasure to meet you. Is everything all right with your car? Looked like you pulled in kind of fast." "Eleanor, please," she corrected him, a faint hint of a smile softening the corners of her mouth. "And no, Mr. Miller, everything is not all right with my car. In fact," she gestured back towards the sleek black machine with a sigh of exasperation, "it appears to have decided to stage a rather dramatic protest against this Arizona heat." "Car trouble on Route 66, Jake said with a knowing grin. "Classic. Let's take a look." He gestured towards the open hood of her car. "Pop the hood." Eleanor hesitated for a moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, she moved with surprising agility for a woman in her tailored trousers and perfectly coiffed hair. She reached into the car and released the hood latch with a smooth click. Jake moved forward, his toolbox in hand, and Eleanor stepped back, allowing him to take charge. He leaned over the engine, his years of tinkering with cars kicking in. He quickly diagnosed the problem: overheated engine, likely a radiator issue. Simple enough fix for someone who knew what they were doing. As Jake worked, Eleanor watched him, her gaze thoughtful, her silence companionable rather than intrusive. Sarah, who had been quietly observing from the diner doorway, peeked out and then, emboldened by curiosity, ventured closer, her pancake-smeared face tilted up at Eleanor. Eleanor noticed her instantly. Her sharp blue eyes softened as they focused on Sarah. She crouched down, bringing herself to the little girl's level. "And who is this?" she asked, her voice losing some of its polished edge, becoming gentler, almost tender. "This is my daughter Sarah," Jake said, glancing up from the engine, a hint of pride coloring his voice. "Sarah, this is Miss Vance." "Eleanor," she corrected gently, extending a hand towards Sarah. Sarah, usually shy around strangers, surprised Jake by stepping forward and tentatively taking Eleanor's hand. Her small hand disappeared almost entirely within Eleanor's. "Hi," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "Hello, Sarah," Eleanor replied, her smile now reaching her eyes, crinkling the corners. "Are you helping your father at the diner today?" Sarah nodded seriously. "I'm the taste tester," she announced with importance. "I make sure the pancakes are perfect." Eleanor's smile widened. "A very important job indeed," she said, her gaze shifting back to Jake, a new warmth entering her eyes. "It seems you have a very capable assistant, Mr. Miller." Jake straightened up from the engine, wiping his hands on a rag, a genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time that day. "I do," he agreed, looking at Sarah with undisguised affection. "The best assistant a diner owner could ask for." He turned back to Eleanor, gesturing towards the diner. "Engine's going to need some time to cool down. Radiator's definitely the culprit. Simple fix, but Well, Arizona heat and overheated engines aren't exactly a quick combination. Why don't you come inside, Eleanor? Get out of this sun. I can offer you the best iced tea this side of the Mississippi, and Sarah here can vouch for the pancakes." Eleanor considered for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the faded diner sign, then back to Jake, his kind eyes and honest smile. A decision seemed to form in her clear blue eyes. "I believe," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, "I would like that very much, Mr. Miller." And with a subtle nod of her silver head, Eleanor Vance, the woman from another world, followed Jake and his little daughter into the welcoming shade of the Route 66 diner. Jake held the door open, a gesture both welcoming and slightly hesitant as Eleanor stepped inside the Route 66 diner. The interior was a deliberate contrast to the sleek modernity of her car, a step back in time, a living, breathing postcard. From a bygone era, cool air, tinged with the lingering scent of coffee and frying bacon, enveloped them, a welcome respite from the Arizona heat. Sunlight streamed through the large front windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and highlighting the diner's vintage charm. The checkered tile floor, the red vinyl booths lining the walls, the formica countertop gleaming under, the soft light of pendant lamps. Framed photographs of classic cars and Route 66 landmarks adorned the walls, interspersed with vintage advertisements for Coca-Cola and gasoline brands long since faded from memory. Eleanor paused just inside the doorway, her gaze slowly sweeping around the diner, taking in every detail. Jake watched her, curious about her reaction. He'd poured his heart and soul into keeping this place as close to its original glory as possible, but through the eyes of someone like Eleanor Vance, someone accustomed to a world of sleek steel and glass, he wondered what she saw. Sarah, however, was not burdened by such self-consciousness. She skipped ahead, pulling Eleanor towards their usual booth by the window. "Sit here, Miss Vance. It's the best booth. You can see everything." Eleanor smiled and allowed Sarah to lead her to the booth. She slid into the red vinyl seat with surprising ease, her tailored trousers rustling softly. Jake followed, settling. Across from her, Sarah nestled beside him, her eyes fixed on their guest with unabashed curiosity. "Please, Eleanor," Jake corrected gently, echoing her earlier request. "And thank you for braving the Route 66 diner, Eleanor." He gestured, around with a self-deprecating smile. "It's not exactly the Ritz." Eleanor's lips curved into a genuine smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners again. "On the contrary, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice warm, "it's charming, authentic. It has character." She paused, her gaze lingering on a black and white photograph of a gleaming 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air parked in front of a brightly lit diner, a scene frozen in time. "It's like stepping into a time capsule." "That's what we're going for," Jake chuckled, relaxing a little. "Uncle Ray, who started this place back in the 50s, always said it was about more than just the food. It was about the experience, the feeling of home." "He succeeded," Eleanor said softly, her gaze still fixed on the photograph, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "It does feel welcoming." She finally turned her attention back to Jake, her blue eyes direct and thoughtful. "So, Mr. Miller, or Jake, if I may," she inclined her head slightly, "tell me about this place. Tell me about Route 66 Diner." And so he did. He told her about his Uncle Ray, a Korean War veteran who had returned to Harmony Springs and poured his savings and his dreams into this little diner. He told her about the diner's heyday, when Route 66 was the main street of America, and this place was buzzing with travelers from all corners of the country, families on vacation, truckers hauling goods across the continent, movie stars stopping for a bite on their way to Hollywood. He told her about the diner's slow decline as the interstate bypassed Harmony Springs, and about his own struggles to keep it afloat, to honor his uncle's legacy, and to build a future for his daughter. Eleanor listened intently, her gaze unwavering, asking questions that showed genuine interest, not just politeness. She asked about the history of Harmony Springs, about the local community, about Sarah's school and hobbies. She listened with a quiet intensity that made Jake feel like his stories, his struggles, his life actually mattered to someone. Sarah, initially content with her pancakes, gradually joined the conversation, her childish pronouncements adding a touch of innocence and charm to the exchange. She told Eleanor about her favorite cartoon characters, about her best friend Lily, about the stray kitten she'd found behind the diner and secretly named Pancake. Eleanor listened to Sarah with the same attentiveness she'd given Jake, her laughter warm and genuine when Sarah recounted Pancake's latest antics. She treated Sarah not as a child to be patronized, but as a person to be respected, engaging her in conversation as if they were equals. As they talked, Jake found himself relaxing more and more in Eleanor's presence. He was surprised by how easy it was to talk to her, despite their vastly different worlds. He'd expected her to be aloof, dismissive, maybe even condescending. Instead, he found her to be grounded, real, and surprisingly, lonely. He sensed a deep-seated sadness beneath her polished exterior, a weariness that resonated with his own. He, in turn, found himself fascinated by Eleanor. He was curious about her life, about her world, about the experiences that had shaped her into the woman she was today. He knew she was wealthy, successful, powerful. The car, her clothes, her effortless air of command spoke volumes. But it wasn't her wealth that intrigued him. It was the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in her voice, the hint of vulnerability she couldn't quite conceal. Time seemed to slow down, the afternoon heat momentarily forgotten as they talked and laughed and shared stories in the cool, comforting space of the Route 66 diner. For Jake, it was a welcome escape from the relentless worries that usually occupied his mind. For Eleanor, it seemed to be something different, something unexpected, something refreshing. Finally, as the afternoon sun began to slant lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the highway, Eleanor glanced at her watch, a slim, elegant timepiece that probably cost more than Jake's entire diner. Goodness. Look at the time, she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. I had no idea. I'm afraid I must be going. I have a meeting in Flagstaff later this evening. Flagstaff's a bit of a drive from here, Jake said, a touch of regret creeping into his voice. He'd enjoyed her company more than he'd expected. Indeed. Eleanor smiled. Perhaps next time I should ensure my car is in better working order before venturing onto Route 66. Her gaze met Jake's, a playful glint in her blue eyes. Or perhaps, she added softly, I should simply plan for a longer stop at Route 66 diner. Jake's heart did a little unexpected flutter. We'd be happy to have you, he said, managing a casual tone, despite the sudden warmth spreading through him. Any time. Eleanor reached for her purse, a chic leather clutch, and Jake instinctively moved to stop her. Please, Eleanor, the iced tea's on the house. Consider it roadside assistance. Nonsense, Mr. Miller, she said firmly, extracting a slim wallet from her purse. Hospitality is never free, and excellent iced tea, such as yours, deserves to be properly compensated. She placed a generous bill on the table, a denomination Jake rarely saw in a single transaction at his diner. Then, with a wink, she added another bill on top. And this, she said, glancing at Sarah with a warm smile, is for the pancake taste tester, for a job well done. Sarah giggled, her eyes wide with delight at the unexpected windfall. Eleanor stood up, smoothing down her trousers with elegant hands. She extended her hand to Jake again. Thank you, Jake Miller, she said, her handshake firm and sincere, for the iced tea, for fixing my car, and for the delightful conversation. "The pleasure was all mine, Eleanor," Jake replied, meeting her gaze, feeling a connection forming that was both surprising and hopeful. Eleanor turned to Sarah, crouching down again. "Goodbye, Sarah," she said softly. "It was lovely to meet you, pancake taste tester." "Bye, Miss Vance," Sarah chirped, waving enthusiastically. "Come back soon." Eleanor smiled, her eyes lingering on Jake for a moment longer, a silent promise passing between them. Then, with another elegant nod, she turned and walked back towards her sleek black car, leaving Jake standing in the doorway of the Route 66 diner, watching her go, a strange mix of warmth and wonder filling his heart. The afternoon heat seemed a little less oppressive now, the silence of the diner a little less lonely. And for the first time in a long time, Jake Miller felt a flicker of genuine hope for the future, a feeling as unexpected and as welcome as the woman who had just driven away in the black obsidian car. Jake watched the sleek black car disappear down Route 66, a small plume of dust swirling in its wake, before finally turning back to the diner. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty tables, and the silence of the diner seemed to press in on him again, but it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of loneliness and worry, but a quieter, more reflective silence, filled with the echoes of laughter and conversation. He stood for a moment in the doorway, taking a deep breath. The scent of Eleanor's perfume, faint but lingering still in the air, mingling with the familiar aroma of coffee and frying onions. It was a pleasant scent, a reminder of the unexpected interlude in his day, the splash of color in his monochrome world. He shook his head slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. Eleanor Vance, a billionaire, stopping at his diner, talking to him, laughing with Sarah. It felt surreal, like a scene from a movie, not real life in Harmony Springs, Arizona. He walked back behind the counter, starting to clear away the few dishes from Sarah's late lunch, his mind replaying snippets of their conversation. He remembered the warmth in Eleanor's blue eyes when she looked at Sarah, the genuine interest in her questions about his life, the way she'd listened, really listened to what he had to say. He'd met wealthy people before, of course. Tourists passing through Harmony Springs, sometimes in fancy RVs or expensive motorcycles. But Eleanor Vance was different. There was a groundedness to her, a lack of pretense that surprised him. Despite her obvious wealth and sophistication, she hadn't seemed to look down on him or his struggling diner. In fact, she seemed charmed by it. He chuckled again, imagining his Uncle Ray's reaction if he could see this. Uncle Ray, who always said the diner had a magic of its own, a way of bringing people together no matter where they came from. Maybe, just maybe, Uncle Ray was right. Maybe there was still a little magic left in Route 66 diner. He glanced over at Sarah, who was now drawing at a booth by the window, her tongue peeking out in concentration. She was humming softly to herself, a little tune she'd made up about Pancake the kitten. He watched her for a moment, his heart swelling with love and protectiveness. He wanted so much for her, for both of them. He wanted to give her a life, free from worry, a future as bright as her smile. Eleanor Vance, could she somehow be a part of that future? The thought popped into his head, unbidden, surprising him with its audacity. A billionaire and a struggling diner owner, it was absurd, impossible, worlds apart. And yet, there had been a connection. He'd felt it, a spark of something real in her gaze, in her words, in the easy flow of their conversation. And he'd seen it in her eyes too, a flicker of something beyond politeness, a hint of interest. He shook his head again, dismissing the thought as quickly as it had come. He was getting ahead of himself. Eleanor Vance was a sophisticated businesswoman, passing through Harmony Springs on her way to a meeting in Flagstaff. She was being polite, friendly, perhaps even a little nostalgic for a simpler time. That was all. He shouldn't read too much into it, but he couldn't quite shake the feeling that there was something more to it. Something unspoken. Something promising. He finished clearing the counter, wiping it down with a damp cloth, his movements automatic, his mind still replaying the afternoon's unexpected encounter. He caught sight of the generous tip Eleanor had left, still sitting on the table, a splash of crisp green against the faded red formica. He picked it up, feeling the unfamiliar thickness of the bills between his fingers. It was more than he usually made in an entire lunch rush. He hesitated for a moment, then on impulse he tucked the bills into his apron pocket, a small secretive smile curving his lips. He wouldn't use it for bills. Not yet. He'd save it, just in case. Just in case Eleanor Vance did decide to stop at Route 66 Diner again. Meanwhile, miles away, as Eleanor Vance's sleek black car sped along the highway towards Flagstaff, Eleanor leaned back against the soft leather seat, her thoughts also drifting back to the Route 66 diner and its owner, Jake Miller. She glanced out the window at the passing Arizona landscape, the vast expanse of desert bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. She'd traveled the world, seen breathtaking sights, stayed in the finest hotels, dined in Michelin-starred restaurants. And yet, somehow, the memory that lingered most vividly in her mind was not of any of those glamorous experiences, but of a small, slightly faded diner on a forgotten stretch of highway and the kind eyes of a struggling single father. She thought about Jake's stories, about his dedication to his diner, his love for his daughter, his quiet strength in the face of adversity. She'd met countless successful, powerful men in her life, men who commanded empires and controlled billions, but none of them had possessed the same authenticity, the same genuine warmth that she had sensed in Jake Miller. She smiled to herself, remembering Sarah's serious pronouncements about pancake taste testing and Jake's gentle pride in his daughter. It was a world away from her own structured, often lonely world, a world filled with board meetings and business deals and endless travel. And yet, there was something undeniably appealing about the simplicity, the humanity, the realness of it. She reached for her phone, a sleek device that connected her to her vast business empire, to a world of instant communication and global reach. But instead of checking emails or making calls, she opened her search engine and typed in Route 66 Diner, Harmony Springs, Arizona. The search results appeared instantly, a string of links and images. She clicked on the diner's website, a simple, slightly outdated page, but charmingly so. She scrolled through the menu, imagining Jake in the kitchen, expertly flipping those legendary pancakes. She clicked on the About Us section, reading about Uncle Ray, the diner's history, and Jake's commitment to keeping the legacy alive. She paused on a small, slightly blurry photograph of Jake standing in front of the diner, his arm around a smiling woman, presumably Mary, and a younger Sarah perched on his shoulders. A family, a real family. Something Eleanor hadn't had in a very long time. A thought formed in her mind, a thought as unexpected and as intriguing as her detour to Route 66 Diner. Perhaps, just perhaps, her GPS hadn't made a mistake after all. Perhaps it had guided her to Harmony Springs, not just for roadside assistance, but for something more. Something destined. She closed her phone, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. Flagstaff and her meetings could wait. She had a diner to revisit, and a certain diner owner to see again. True to her unspoken promise, Eleanor Vance returned to Route 66 Diner. Not the next day, nor the day after that, but the following week, on a sunny Thursday afternoon, her sleek black car once again gliding into the gravel parking lot. This time, Jake was ready, or as ready as a man could be when a billionaire with eyes like glacial ice and a smile that could melt asphalt walked back into his life. He'd polish the diner until it gleamed, stocked up on fresh blueberries for her pancakes, just in case, and even managed to replace the flickering R in the neon sign, the word diner, now burning bright and welcoming against the azure sky. He was behind the counter, meticulously arranging a display of freshly baked apple pies, when he saw her car pull in. His heart did a little skip, a feeling he hadn't experienced in, well, longer than he cared to remember. He smoothed down his apron, took a deep breath, and forced a casual smile as she walked through the door, the bell above jingling merrily, announcing her arrival like a fanfare. "Eleanor," he greeted her, his smile genuine now, warmth flooding through him. "Welcome back. Car behaving itself this time?" "Impeccably, thank you," she replied, her lips curving into a smile. As she approached the counter, "It seems a little persuasion from a certain diner owner worked wonders." Her blue eyes twinkled with amusement. "Just a bit of Route 66 magic," Jake chuckled, gesturing towards a stool at the counter. "The usual. Iced tea." "Iced tea would be perfect, thank you." She settled onto the stool with her usual grace, placing her chic handbag beside her. Then her gaze shifted, and her smile softened even further as she noticed Sarah, peeking out from behind Jake's legs, her eyes wide and curious. "Well, hello again, pancake taste tester," Eleanor said, her voice gentle. "It's lovely to see you again, Sarah." Sarah, emboldened by Eleanor's warm smile and the memory of the generous tip, stepped forward, her shyness momentarily forgotten. "Hi, Miss Vance." "Eleanor?" She corrected herself, remembering Jake's words. "Did you come for more pancakes?" Eleanor laughed, a light melodic sound that filled the diner with unexpected joy. "Pancakes are certainly tempting," she admitted, glancing at Jake with a playful glint in her eyes. "But today, I thought I'd try something different. Perhaps you could recommend something special, Sarah." Sarah puffed out her chest with importance, considering the question with the gravity of a seasoned food critic. She tapped her chin with a small finger. "You should try Daddy's." "Daddy, what should Miss Vance try?" Jake, who had been watching the interaction with a warm smile, chuckled. "How about our famous patty melt, or maybe the chili? It's a bit warm for chili, though." "The patty melt sounds wonderful," Eleanor interjected, her gaze returning to Jake, a new warmth entering her eyes. "Patty, melt, and iced tea. Perfect." "Coming right up," Jake said, feeling a surge of something. Excitement, anticipation. Whatever it was a welcome change from the usual humdrum routine of his days. And so began Eleanor's frequent visits to Route 66 Diner. They weren't planned, not exactly. She'd simply happen to be driving through Harmony Springs or in the area for a meeting, and would pop in for lunch or an afternoon iced tea. But these chance encounters became a regular occurrence, happening once a week, then twice, then sometimes even more frequently. They weren't dates, not in the traditional sense. They were unscripted rendezvous, unfolding organically within the familiar, comforting space of the diner. Eleanor would sit at the counter or in their usual booth, and they would talk about everything and nothing, about her travels, her business, her childhood in Europe, her late husband, about Jake's struggles with the diner, his memories of Mary, his hopes and dreams for Sarah. They talked about books, movies, music, politics, the changing landscape of Route 66, the quirks of small-town life, the vastness of the Arizona desert. Eleanor was a brilliant conversationalist, witty, insightful, and surprisingly down-to-earth, despite her vast wealth and worldly experience. She listened as much as she talked, her blue eyes always attentive, always engaged. Jake, in turn, found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't opened up to anyone since Mary. He felt comfortable sharing his worries, his dreams, his vulnerabilities with Eleanor, sensing a genuine empathy and understanding in her gaze. Sarah, of course, was delighted by Eleanor's visits. She'd quickly adopted Eleanor as an honorary member of their little family, greeting her with enthusiastic hugs and showering her with drawings and pancake-related artwork. She'd even started calling Eleanor Aunt Eleanor, a term Jake hadn't corrected, finding a surprising warmth in the sound of it himself. Sarah, with the uncanny perception of a child, seemed to sense the unspoken connection growing between her father and Eleanor. She'd often observe them with wide, knowing eyes, sometimes interjecting into their conversations with innocent questions that were deceptively insightful. "Daddy, is Eleanor your friend lady?" she'd ask one day, while Eleanor was in the restroom. Jake, caught off guard, stammered slightly. "Well, yes, Peanut. Eleanor is a friend. A very nice friend." Sarah nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the restroom door. "She smiles at you a lot, Daddy," she observed, her voice thoughtful. "And you smile at her, more than you smile at other people." Jake chuckled, ruffling her hair, his heart doing that little skip again. "Well, Eleanor is a very smile-worthy person, isn't she?" Sarah simply nodded, her eyes still fixed on the restroom door, a knowing little smile playing on her own lips. Pancake diplomacy, it seemed, was in full effect. As the weeks turned into months, the chance encounters at Route 66 Diner became less and less about chance and more about something else, something undefined, unspoken, but undeniably present in the air between Jake and Eleanor, as palpable as the scent of brewing coffee and as warm as the Arizona sun streaming through the diner windows. A feeling that was slowly, subtly, but surely beginning to blossom into something more. The easy rhythm of Eleanor's visits to Route 66 Diner, the quiet joy that had blossomed in Jake's life, couldn't remain untouched by reality forever. The world, with its ingrained prejudices and societal expectations, was beginning to take notice, casting shadows on their budding connection. It started subtly, with raised eyebrows and whispered comments in Harmony Springs. The locals were friendly, welcoming, but small towns had a way of noticing everything and everyone. A sleek black car pulling up regularly to the struggling Route 66 diner, driven by a sophisticated woman who was clearly not from around here, was bound to raise questions. At first, it was just curiosity. Mrs. Henderson from the hardware store would linger a little longer at the counter, her eyes darting towards Eleanor's table. Old Mr. Abernathy, who held court every morning at the regulars booth, would clear his throat pointedly whenever Eleanor entered, his gaze following her every move. Jake ignored it, chalking it up to small-town curiosity, a harmless side effect of life in Harmony Springs. But then the whispers started. Jake overheard snippets of conversations at the counter, hushed tones that ceased abruptly when he approached. He caught Mrs. Peterson, the town gossip, leaning conspiratorially over the counter with Martha from the bakery, their eyes flicking in Eleanor's direction as they spoke. He couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He knew what they were talking about. One afternoon, Danny, a regular customer and a well-meaning, if somewhat blunt friend, pulled Jake aside as he was refilling Danny's coffee. "Jake," Danny said, his voice low and concerned, "you know folks are talking." "Right," Jake sighed, bracing himself. "Talking about what, Danny?" he asked, even though he already knew. "About you and that fancy lady," Danny said, nodding towards Eleanor's booth where she was working on her laptop, Sarah coloring beside her. "Eleanor Vance, right? Heard she's some kind of big shot from out of state." "She's a customer." "Danny," Jake said, keeping his tone neutral, "a very nice customer." Sure, Danny said, unconvinced. "But, Jake, you gotta be careful, you know? Folks around here, they get ideas, and, well, you're a good guy, Jake. You deserve better than to be taken for a ride. Jake's jaw tightened. Taken for a ride? He repeated, his voice hardening slightly. What's that supposed to mean, Danny? Danny, sensing Jake's rising irritation, backpedaled quickly. No offense, Jake, none intended. Just looking out for you, that's all. Just saying, folks are wondering what a woman like that is doing, spending so much time in a place like this, with a guy like you. He clapped Jake on the shoulder, a gesture meant to be friendly, but it felt heavy, judgmental. Just be careful, buddy. That's all I'm saying. Danny's words, though well-intentioned, stung more than Jake cared to admit. He knew Danny was just echoing the unspoken sentiments of many in Harmony Springs. The whispers weren't malicious. Not exactly, but they were laced with skepticism, with doubt, with a subtle undercurrent of class prejudice. A woman like Eleanor Vance, a billionaire, had no business being interested in a struggling diner owner like Jake Miller. It just wasn't proper. It wasn't believable. And Jake, despite the undeniable connection he felt with Eleanor, despite the warmth and genuine affection in her eyes, couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Was he being foolish? Was he reading too much into her kindness, her attention, her frequent visits? Was he just setting himself up for heartbreak? The thought gnawed at him, a seed of doubt planted by Danny's words, taking root in the fertile ground of his own insecurities. He was just a diner owner in a dying town, struggling to make ends meet, a single dad with a mountain of debt and a past heartbreak he still carried like a weight. Eleanor Vance was a woman who commanded empires, who moved in circles he couldn't even imagine, who could have any man in the world at her feet. What could she possibly see in him? What could they possibly have in common beyond a shared fondness for pancakes and iced tea? He glanced over at Eleanor again. She was still working on her laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. She looked magnificent and completely out of his league. Sudden wave of insecurity washed over him, cold and sharp. He suddenly felt acutely aware of the worn patches on his apron, the grease stains on his jeans, the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. He was just Jake Miller, the pancake flipper, and Eleanor Vance was Eleanor Vance. Worlds apart. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to shake off the negativity. He wouldn't let the whispers, the doubts, his own insecurities poison what was blossoming between him and Eleanor. He valued her friendship, her company, her presence in his life. And if that was all it could ever be, then he would cherish it for as long as it lasted. But as he watched Eleanor laugh at something Sarah whispered in her ear, a genuine, warm laugh that lit up her face and chased away the shadows in her blue eyes, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered a different possibility, a possibility that was both terrifying and exhilarating, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, worlds apart could somehow find a way to connect, if only they were brave enough to try. Eleanor Vance was not a woman who missed details. Decades of running a global corporation had honed her observational skills to a razor's edge. She could read a balance sheet, a market trend, or a human face with equal precision. And as she became a regular fixture at Route 66 Diner, her astute gaze began to notice things beyond the charming vintage decor and Jake Miller's warm smile. She noticed the way Jake's brow would furrow slightly when he looked at the stack of bills on the counter, the subtle tension in his shoulders as he talked about the rising cost of supplies, the way he always seemed to be working from dawn until well past dusk, never taking a break. She noticed the faded patches on Jake's apron, the worn soles of his work boots, the older model pickup truck he drove, reliable but clearly showing its age. She noticed the little things, the subtle signs of financial strain that Jake, with his quiet pride, tried to conceal but couldn't quite hide from her perceptive eyes. She saw fewer and fewer customers at the diner, especially during the weekdays. She heard Jake politely deflect questions from suppliers on the phone, his voice carefully modulated, but she could sense the underlying anxiety. She saw the stack of flyers for local events and attractions, placed strategically by the cash register, desperate attempts to draw in more business, and she listened. She listened to the conversations between Jake and his regular customers, snippets of dialogue that painted a picture of a town struggling to stay afloat, businesses closing, families leaving, hope slowly dwindling. She heard the unspoken worries, hanging in the air like the Arizona heat, the quiet desperation of a community facing hard times. One afternoon, as Jake was refilling her iced tea, Eleanor decided to broach the subject, tentatively at first, testing the waters. "Jake," she said, her voice casual, "business been steady lately?" Jake paused, his smile faltering for just a fraction of a second, but Eleanor's keen eyes caught it. He recovered quickly, though, his smile returning. A little too forced. "Oh, you know, Eleanor, diner business, always interesting, never a dull moment." He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Eleanor held his gaze, her blue eyes unwavering. "Interesting as in challenging?" She pressed gently, her tone softening. Jake hesitated for a moment, then sighed, running a hand through his hair, the weariness he usually kept hidden momentarily surfacing. "Truth be told, Eleanor," he admitted, his voice dropping slightly, "it's been tough. Harmony Springs ain't exactly booming these days. Folks are leaving. Tourists are driving right by on the interstate. It's a struggle keeping the doors open." He shrugged, forcing another smile, trying to downplay his worries. "But we're hanging in there, always do." Eleanor studied his face, seeing past the forced smile, recognizing the genuine concern in his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried on his shoulders. She saw not just a struggling diner owner, but a proud, hard-working man fighting to keep his family legacy alive, fighting for his daughter's future, fighting for his community. And her heart softened with a deep wave of empathy and admiration. "Jake," she said, her voice low and sincere, "I understand. Running a small business is never easy, especially in these times, and I admire your dedication, your grit." Jake looked up at her, surprised by her words, touched by her genuine concern. "Thanks, Eleanor," he said quietly, his smile becoming more genuine this time, tinged with gratitude. "Means a lot to hear you say that." A comfortable silence settled between them, the unspoken understanding hanging in the air, heavier than the Arizona heat. Eleanor sipped her iced tea, her mind working, considering how she could help Jake, how she could ease his burden without undermining his pride or making him feel indebted. She knew Jake Miller was not a man who would easily accept charity. He was proud, independent, resourceful. Any help she offered would have to be carefully considered, subtly presented, and genuinely beneficial to both him and his diner. She glanced around the Route 66 diner, her gaze lingering on the vintage decor, the faded photographs, the worn but clean booths, the comforting atmosphere that Jake had painstakingly maintained. She saw not just a struggling business, but a place with history, with character, with potential. A place worth saving, and a man worth helping. An idea began to form in her mind, a plan as unexpected and as intriguing as her detour to Harmony Springs had been. A plan that could not only help Jake and his diner, but also perhaps bring them closer together in ways neither of them could yet imagine. A plan that would require careful consideration, delicate execution, and a leap of faith from both of them, And Eleanor Vance, the billionaire businesswoman, was not one to shy away from a challenge, especially when it involved a little bit of Route 66 magic. Eleanor Vance drove away from Route 66 Diner that afternoon, with more than just the taste of excellent iced tea and blueberry pancakes lingering on her palate. The image of Jake Miller standing in the doorway of his struggling diner, his kind eyes shadowed with worry, stayed with her, a persistent echo in the otherwise orderly symphony of her thoughts. Back in her Flagstaff hotel suite, overlooking the panoramic city lights, Eleanor found herself unable to shake off the feeling of unease. She, Eleanor Vance, a woman who orchestrated multi-billion-dollar deals, who moved markets with a single phone call, felt a pang of genuine concern for a struggling diner owner in a forgotten town on Route 66. It was unexpected and unsettlingly compelling. She paced the length of her luxurious suite, her mind racing, analyzing the situation with the same strategic precision she applied to her business ventures. Jake's diner wasn't just a business. It was his life, his legacy, his connection to his past, and his hope for the future. And it was faltering, failing perhaps, unless something changed. And Eleanor Vance was a woman who knew how to make change happen. She stopped pacing, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the glittering cityscape. Flagstaff was thriving, a modern hub of commerce and tourism, a world away from the quiet desperation of Harmony Springs. The contrast was stark, and it solidified her resolve. She couldn't just stand by and watch Route 66 Diner and Jake Miller fade away. But how to help? Simply writing a check would be insulting, condescending, and utterly ineffective in the long run. Jake wasn't looking for charity. He was looking for a chance to succeed, to rebuild, to thrive. He needed a lifeline, not a handout. Eleanor spent the rest of the evening immersed in research. She delved into online articles about the revitalization of Route 66, about successful small businesses in small towns, about innovative marketing strategies for diners. She analyzed demographic data for Harmony Springs and surrounding areas, studying local tourism trends, and even researching the history of Route 66 Diner itself, uncovering its past glory, its deep roots in the community. As the hours ticked by, a plan began to take shape in her mind, a blueprint for revitalization that was both ambitious and grounded, respectful of the diner's history and relevant to the modern market. It wasn't just about injecting money, it was about injecting ideas, innovation, and strategic expertise. It was about helping Jake rediscover the magic of Route 66 Diner and reignite its potential. The next morning, after a restless night filled with brainstorming and outlining, Eleanor called her office, rescheduling her meetings, much to the consternation of her busy staff. She had a more pressing engagement, she explained, a matter of personal investment. And then she turned her sleek black car back towards Harmony Springs, her mind buzzing with ideas, her heart set on a new and unexpected course. When she walked into Route 66 Diner later that morning, Jake was surprised, but not entirely unprepared. He'd been expecting her in a way, half hoping, half dreading her return. The diner was quiet, mid-morning lull. Only a few regulars scattered. At the counter, "Eleanor," he greeted her, a mixture of surprise and pleasure in his voice. "Back so soon? Business in Flagstaff wrapped up quicker than expected," she said smoothly, settling into their usual booth, a hint of a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "And I found myself craving another one of those legendary patty melts." Jake chuckled, relief washing over him. "Patty melt it is," he said, heading towards the kitchen. But as he prepared her order, his mind raced, wondering what had really brought Eleanor Vance back to Harmony Springs so soon. He sensed something different in her demeanor, a focused energy, a subtle air of purpose. It wasn't just a casual visit this time. He could feel it in his bones. When he returned with her patty melt and iced tea, Eleanor was gazing around the diner again, her blue eyes thoughtful, almost analytical. She looked up as he approached, her smile warm but her gaze direct, serious. "Jake," she began, her voice low, steady, "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about the diner." Jake's heart skipped a beat. Here it comes, he thought, bracing himself for what? A polite offer of a loan, a well-meaning but ultimately empty gesture of encouragement. "And," Eleanor continued, her gaze holding his, "I have an idea, a rather unconventional idea, perhaps, but I think it could work, if you're willing to consider it." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a slim, elegant folder, placing it on the table between them. "Perhaps," she said, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief, "over lunch we could discuss a potential business proposition." Jake stared at the folder, at Eleanor, his mind racing, his heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and a surge of wild, unexpected hope. A business proposition from Eleanor Vance for Route 66 Diner. It was unbelievable, impossible, and yet here she was, sitting across from him, her blue eyes sparkling with possibility, a folder promising something that could change everything, something that could be destiny. Jake stared at the slim folder Eleanor had placed on the table, its elegant simplicity a stark contrast to the worn formica surface of their booth. "A business proposition?" he repeated, his voice a mix of disbelief and burgeoning hope. "For Route 66 Diner," Eleanor nodded, her blue eyes steady, a hint of excitement dancing within them. "Exactly, Jake, for Route 66 Diner, and for Jake Miller," she added softly, her gaze meeting his. She opened the folder, revealing neatly organized pages, charts, and photographs, a miniature business plan meticulously crafted for his humble roadside eatery. "I've been doing some research," she began, her tone becoming crisp and businesslike, the CEO taking over from the charming woman he'd come to know over iced tea and patty melts. "And I believe Route 66 Diner has untapped potential." She gestured around the diner, her gaze encompassing the vintage decor, the comforting atmosphere, the very essence of the place. "This isn't just a diner, Jake. It's an experience. It's a piece of Americana. It's something valuable." Jake listened intently as Eleanor laid out her plan, point by point, her presentation as polished and professional as any corporate boardroom pitch. She spoke of market analysis, identifying the untapped tourist potential of Route 66, the growing nostalgia for authentic Americana, the power of social media and online marketing. "The diner needs a revitalization, Jake," she explained, her voice firm but encouraging. "Not a radical change, but a strategic evolution. We need to enhance what's already here, amplify its strengths, and modernize its presentation to attract a wider audience." Her plan wasn't just vague ideas, it was concrete and detailed. She proposed a phased approach, starting with a subtle rebranding, a fresh coat of paint, updated signage that retained the vintage charm but added a touch of modern appeal. She suggested a website, social media presence, online ordering, leveraging platforms like Instagram and food blogs to reach a younger, wider customer base. "We can highlight your legendary pancakes, Jake," she said, a smile gracing her lips. "Make them a destination dish. We can create themed nights, live music events, partner with local Route 66 tourism groups. We can tap into the nostalgia, the history, the romance of Route 66, and make Route 66 Diner the must-stop destination in Harmony Springs." She spoke of menu enhancements, not drastic changes, but subtle upgrades, sourcing local ingredients, adding a few trendy dishes to appeal to modern palates, while keeping the classic diner fare that was the diner's heart and soul. She even suggested A small retail corner selling Route 66 diner-branded merchandise, T-shirts, mugs, local souvenirs, capitalizing on the diner's newfound fame. Throughout her presentation, Eleanor emphasized that this was a partnership, not a takeover. "I'm not looking to own your diner, Jake," she said, her blue eyes meeting his directly. "I believe in your vision, in your talent, in the heart and soul of this place. I want to invest in you, in Route 66 Diner, and in the community of Harmony Springs." Her financial proposal was equally generous and strategic. She offered to invest a significant sum, not as a loan with crippling interest rates, but as equity, becoming a silent partner, providing the capital and business expertise to fuel the diner's revitalization. In return, she would share in the diner's future success, but the diner would remain Jake's, his vision, his legacy. Jake listened, mesmerized, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within him. Disbelief, excitement, gratitude, and a healthy dose of apprehension. It was overwhelming. To think that Eleanor Vance, a billionaire businesswoman, was sitting in his humble diner, proposing a plan to save his business, to change his life. It was like something out of a dream. He looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, seeing not just the successful businesswoman, but the woman who had listened to his stories, who had laughed with Sarah, who had seen the potential in his struggling. Dana when no one else did. He saw genuine warmth, intelligence, and a fierce determination in her eyes. And he saw something else, something softer, something hopeful, reflected back at him. Sarah, who had been quietly coloring throughout Eleanor's presentation, suddenly piped up, her childish voice cutting through the businesslike atmosphere. "Daddy," she said, her eyes wide with excitement, "does this mean we can get a new sign, one that doesn't blink?" Jake chuckled, a genuine, heartfelt laugh that eased some of the tension knotting his shoulders. He looked at Sarah, at Eleanor, at the folder outlining a future he hadn't dared to dream of just weeks ago. A future where Route 66 Diner could not only survive but thrive. A future that could be brighter, not just for his diner, but for him and Sarah too. A future with Eleanor Vance in it. He took a deep breath, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Eleanor," he said, his voice steady, filled with a newfound resolve, "tell me more about this business proposition." Destiny, it seemed, was not just knocking at the door of Route 66 Diner. It was walking right in, folder in hand, and ready to do business. Jake spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, the elegant folder Eleanor had left behind feeling heavier than its slim profile suggested. He moved through his routine, cleaning tables, prepping for the dinner rush, chatting with the few evening customers, but his mind was miles away, replaying Eleanor's presentation, her words echoing in his thoughts. Untapped potential, strategic evolution, invest in you, partner, destiny. The words swirled in his head, a potent cocktail of hope and apprehension. It was tempting, undeniably so, to have Eleanor Vance, a woman who could write his diner's rescue with a signature, offer him a lifeline, a chance to not just survive, but thrive. It was a dream come true. A dream he hadn't even dared to dream. But it was also terrifying. To partner with Eleanor Vance was to step into a world he knew nothing about, a world of high stakes and high expectations, a world as different from his quiet life in Harmony Springs as a diamond was from a pancake. He was a diner owner, a pancake flipper, a small-town guy. She was a billionaire, a global businesswoman, a force of nature. What did he really have to offer her? What if he failed? What if he let her down? What if he lost control of the diner, the legacy he was fighting so hard to protect? He confided in Danny that evening, over mugs of lukewarm coffee after the dinner. Rush had petered out. Danny listened patiently, his brow furrowed as Jake recounted Eleanor's proposal, the details of her plan, the sheer audacity of it all. "A billionaire, huh?" Danny said slowly, swirling the coffee in his mug, his gaze thoughtful. "Investing in Route 66 Diner, that's something else, Jake." "Tell me about it," Jake sighed, leaning back against the booth, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "It's incredible, Danny, but it's also scary as hell." "Scary good or scary bad?" Danny asked, his gaze sharp. "That's what I can't figure out," Jake admitted, running a hand through his hair. "It could be amazing, Danny. She's got a real plan, a solid vision. She knows what she's talking about. This could save the diner, save everything. But," Danny prompted, sensing Jake's hesitation. "But it's Eleanor Vance, Danny," Jake said, his voice low. "She's different. Worlds different. What does a woman like that really want with a place like this? With a guy like me?" Danny considered this for a moment, then shrugged, a gesture that was surprisingly insightful. "Maybe she just wants to help, Jake. Maybe she sees something in you, in this place, that's worth saving. Maybe she just likes your pancakes." He winked, a rare flash of humor in his usually serious face. Jake chuckled, a genuine sound this time, easing some of the tension. "Maybe it is the pancakes," he conceded. "Look, Jake," Danny said, his tone becoming serious again. "I can't tell you what to do. It's your diner, your life. But you gotta admit, this is an opportunity, a real one. Route 66. Diner ain't gonna save itself, and you've been busting your butt trying to keep it going for years. Maybe it's time to let someone else lend a hand, especially if that hand belongs to a billionaire." Danny's words resonated with Jake, cutting through the fog of his doubts and anxieties. He was right. He had been struggling for so long, carrying the weight of the diner, the weight of his responsibilities, alone. Maybe it was time to accept help. Maybe it was time to take a leap of faith. He thought about Sarah, sleeping soundly in the apartment above, her dreams as bright and boundless as the Arizona sky. He thought about Mary, her vision for the diner, her belief in him. He thought about Eleanor, her kind eyes, her genuine offer, her belief in Route 66 Diner, and he thought about the flickering neon sign outside, now burning bright again, a symbol of hope, of resilience, of a second chance. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the diner just before lunch, her presence as radiant and unexpected as the Arizona sunrise. Jake was ready for her this time, his mind made up, his heart surprisingly calm, a sense of quiet, resolve settling within him. He met her at the door, a genuine smile on his face, a newfound confidence in his stride. "Eleanor," he greeted her, his voice steady, clear. "Come on in. We need to talk about a business proposition." He led her to their usual booth, the folder still sitting on the table, a silent testament to the potential that lay within. He slid into the booth across from her, his gaze meeting hers, unwavering. "I've read your plan, Eleanor," he said, his voice firm. "I've thought about everything you said, and I have a decision." Eleanor listened, her blue eyes fixed on his, her expression calm, patient, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. Jake took a deep breath, and then he spoke, his voice filled with a newfound hope, a quiet determination that echoed the spirit of Route 66 itself. "Eleanor," he said, extending his hand across the table, a gesture of trust, of partnership, of destiny. "I'm in. Let's do it. Let's save Route 66 Diner." Eleanor's lips curved into a wide, radiant smile, a smile that reached her eyes and lit up the entire diner, chasing away the shadows of doubt and worry that had lingered there for too long. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her handshake firm, warm, and transformative. "I knew you would see the potential, Jake," she said, her voice filled with genuine delight. "Welcome aboard, partner." "I think," she added, her eyes twinkling with mischief, This is going to be the start of something extraordinary. And as their hands clasped, sealing their partnership, sealing their fate, a new chapter began for Route 66 Diner, for Jake Miller, and for Eleanor Vance, a chapter written in the language of hope, resilience, and the undeniable magic of a roadside diner on Route 66. The handshake sealed it. Partners, Jake Miller and Eleanor Vance, an unlikely duo, an improbable alliance. But as they stood in the heart of the Route 66 diner, a shared sense of purpose filled the air, as potent and energizing as a double shot of espresso. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, a flurry of controlled chaos that breathed new life into the sleepy diner and the quiet town of Harmony Springs. Eleanor, true to her word, was a force of nature, a whirlwind of ideas, energy and strategic brilliance. But she was also surprisingly collaborative, respectful of Jake's vision, and deeply attuned to the soul of Route 66 Diner. The revitalization began subtly, tastefully, respecting the diner's vintage charm while injecting a touch of modern polish. First came the paint, a fresh coat of cream and teal, echoing the classic Route 66 color palette, brightening the exterior and making the diner stand out against the dusty landscape. The faded neon sign was carefully restored, every tube glowing. With vibrant color, Route 66 Diner, once again a beacon of warmth and welcome. Inside, the changes were equally transformative, but respectful. The red vinyl booths were reupholstered, the checkered floor meticulously cleaned and polished, the formica countertop gleamed. New pendant lights cast a warm, inviting glow, highlighting the vintage photographs and advertisements that now seemed to pop against the fresh paint. Local artisans were commissioned to create new murals depicting Route 66 landmarks, adding a touch of local artistry and storytelling to the diner's ambiance. Eleanor, with her keen eye for detail, oversaw every aspect of the renovation, working tirelessly alongside Jake, her tailored suits often replaced by jeans and work boots, her silver hair sometimes tucked under a baseball cap. She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, sanding tables, choosing fabrics, even helping Jake hang new vintage-inspired posters. What surprised Jake most was not just Eleanor's business acumen or her tireless energy, but her genuine respect for his expertise, his opinions, his connection to the diner. She valued his input, listened to his concerns, and often deferred to his judgment on matters relating to the diner's food and atmosphere. It was a true partnership, a collaborative dance where their vastly different worlds blended seamlessly, creating something new and exciting. The community of Harmony Springs watched the transformation of Route 66 Diner with a mixture of curiosity and cautious optimism. At first, there were whispers, raised eyebrows, and the usual small-town skepticism. What's that Vance woman up to? Heard she's spending a fortune on that old diner. Hope Jake knows what he's doing, partnering with a city slicker like that. But as the renovations progressed, as the diner began to gleam and glow with newfound life, as Jake and Eleanor became increasingly visible working side by side, the skepticism slowly gave way to excitement and then to enthusiastic support. Local residents volunteered to help with the painting, offered vintage decor items from their attics, and spread the word about the diner's revival with infectious enthusiasm. Sarah, of course, was in her element, thriving amidst the cheerful chaos. She became the diner's unofficial mascot, greeting workers with lemonade and cookies, offering her expert taste-testing services for new menu items. Eleanor, to Jake's amusement, actually incorporated some of Sarah's critiques into the menu development, and generally charming everyone with her infectious energy and bright smile. And amidst the whirlwind of renovations and community involvement, something else was blossoming, slowly, subtly, but undeniably, a romance. Jake and Eleanor, working side by side, sharing late-night planning sessions over lukewarm coffee, laughing at Sarah's antics, discovering unexpected common ground amidst their vastly different worlds, were falling in love. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, not a dramatic movie script affair. It was a slow burn, a quiet simmer, a gentle unfolding of hearts that recognized a kindred spirit, a soulmate in the most unexpected of places. It was built on shared dreams, mutual respect, a growing affection for each other's worlds, and a quiet understanding that transcended words. Their business meetings often stretched late into the evening, spilling over into impromptu dinners. At the diner after Sarah was asleep, shared stories under the starlit Arizona sky, stolen glances across the counter, lingering touches that sent shivers down Jake's spine, and a warmth spreading through Eleanor's heart that she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as they stood outside the diner, admiring the newly lit neon sign against the velvet darkness of the desert night, Eleanor turned to Jake, her blue eyes reflecting the vibrant glow of the neon. "You know, Jake," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "this diner, it's not just changing its look, is it?" Jake met her gaze, his heart swelling with a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite name, but knew instinctively were love. "No, Eleanor," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "It's not just the diner that's changing." He reached for her hand, his touch tentative, hesitant, but Eleanor's fingers intertwined with his instantly, her hand warm and sure in his. They stood there, hand in hand, under the bright glow of the Route 66 diner sign, the silence filled with unspoken promises, the desert air buzzing with a quiet, magical energy. The revival of Route 66 diner was underway, and so was the revival of two hearts, finding love and hope in the most unexpected of places, under the faded neon and the vast Arizona sky. The Route 66 diner was reborn. No longer a faded relic of a bygone era, it was now a vibrant beacon, a shining testament to resilience, reinvention, and the enduring magic of Route 66. The cream and teal paint gleamed under the Arizona sun. The neon sign blazed brightly each night, drawing travelers from miles around, lured by the promise of legendary pancakes, authentic diner fare, and a story that was quickly becoming local legend. Eleanor's revitalization plan had exceeded all expectations. The diner was bustling, from breakfast rush to late-night crowds, locals and tourists alike, drawn to the newly renovated space that somehow managed to feel both fresh and timeless. The website and social media campaigns had worked wonders. Instagram feeds filled with mouth-watering photos of Jake's creations and charming snapshots of the diner's vintage ambiance. Reviews poured in, praising not just the food and the atmosphere, but the warmth of the staff, the sense of community, the feeling of stepping back in time to a simpler, kinder era. Jake, once burdened by worry and exhaustion, now moved through the bustling diner with a newfound energy and confidence. He was still the heart and soul of the place, flipping pancakes with his signature flair, chatting with customers, his smile wider and more frequent than anyone in Harmony Springs had seen in years. But he was no longer alone. Eleanor was always there, a constant presence, not just as a business partner, but as a muse, a confidant, a love that had bloomed in the most unexpected of places. Their partnership had become seamless, a perfect blend of Jake's diner expertise and Eleanor's business acumen. Eleanor handled the marketing, the finances, the big picture strategy, freeing Jake to focus on what he did best, creating delicious food and fostering the diner's warm, welcoming atmosphere. They made decisions together, respecting each other's strengths, complementing each other's weaknesses, their working relationship mirroring the blossoming romance that was now undeniable. Harmony Springs, too, was experiencing a resurgence, a ripple effect of the diner's revival. Tourists drawn to Route 66 Diner were discovering the town's other charms, visiting local shops, exploring historic landmarks, injecting much-needed lifeblood into the struggling community. Other businesses began to spruce up their storefronts. New shops started to open, a sense of optimism and possibility returning to Harmony Springs after years of decline. And at the heart of it all, at the center of this small-town renaissance, was Route 66 Diner, a beacon of hope, a symbol of second chances, a place where destiny had unexpectedly intervened, not just for a diner, but for two hearts. One sun-drenched afternoon, amidst the happy chaos of the lunch rush, Eleanor took Jake's hand, leading him away from the bustling counter out onto the quiet back patio of the diner, a small, secluded space they had recently renovated into a charming outdoor seating area. She turned to him, her blue eyes sparkling with happiness. The Arizona, sun catching the silver strands in her hair, making her look radiant and breathtakingly beautiful. "Jake," she began, her voice soft, a hint of emotion trembling beneath the surface. "Remember when we first met? Your GPS, my overheated car, a chance encounter at a roadside diner." Jake smiled, his heart swelling with love as he gazed at her. "Destiny," he finished for her, his voice low, husky with emotion. "It was destiny, Eleanor." "And destiny," Eleanor continued, her gaze unwavering, her hand tightening around his, "has brought us here, to this place, to this moment, to us." She paused, taking a deep breath, her eyes searching his. "Jake Miller," she said, her voice filled with sincerity and a lifetime of emotion, "will you do me the incredible honor of marrying me?" Jake's breath caught in his throat, tears welling up in his eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. He dreamed of this moment, dared to hope, but never truly believed it could be real. A billionaire and a diner owner, worlds apart, and yet here they were, their hearts entwined, their destinies intertwined. "Eleanor Vance," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." A radiant smile bloomed on Eleanor's face, chasing away any lingering shadows, illuminating her with pure, unadulterated happiness. She stepped closer, her arms circling his neck, pulling him into a tender embrace, a kiss that sealed their promise, a kiss that tasted of hope, of second chances, of a love as timeless and enduring as Route 66 itself. And so, a few months later, under the bright Arizona sky, surrounded by their families, their friends, the entire community of Harmony Springs, Jake Miller and Eleanor Vance were married. Where else but at the heart of their story, at the Route 66 Diner. The diner was transformed once again, this time into a wedding venue, adorned with flowers and fairy lights, the air filled with laughter, music, and the scent of wedding cake mingling with the familiar aroma of brewing coffee. Sarah, a vision in a flower girl dress, beamed with joy, scattering petals with abandon, her eyes sparkling with happiness as she watched her daddy marry his Aunt Eleanor, now officially and forever her mom. As Jake and Eleanor stood hand in hand, exchanging vows under the vintage neon glow of the Route 66 diner sign, a symbol of their love, their journey, their destiny, they knew they had found something truly extraordinary. They had found love in the most unexpected of places, proving that worlds apart could indeed collide, hearts could intertwine, and that sometimes destiny was served with a side of blueberry pancakes and a whole lot of Route 66 magic. And as the celebration continued late into the night, under the starlit Arizona sky, the Route 66 diner, once a symbol of fading dreams, now stood as a beacon of hope, love, and the promise of a sweet forever, for Jake, for Eleanor, for Sarah, and for the entire community of Harmony Springs. And that brings us to the end of Jake and Eleanor's heartwarming story. We hope you enjoyed this journey down Route 66 as much as we loved sharing it with you. What did you love most about Jake and Eleanor's story? Let us know in the comments below. Were you rooting for their romance from the start? And where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to hear from you and connect with our amazing audience around the globe. If you were charmed by the magic of Route 66 Diner and the love story of Jake and Eleanor, then please hit that subscribe button and join our community. By subscribing, you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories, and you'll help us bring even more tales of love, hope, and destiny to you each week. It's completely free, and it means the world to us. Thank you so much for watching Roadside Diner Destiny. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us and letting us share this special story with you. We hope it left you feeling warm, inspired, and maybe even a little bit hungry for some blueberry pancakes. Until next time, keep believing in destiny, and remember to find the magic in every roadside diner you pass by. Take care, and we'll see you in our next story.